Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Hopefully you guys are all having a beautiful, fantastic day. Today's upload is going to be my preliminary winter forecast. If you recall, I made a very early winter outlook, but that technically wasn't my preliminary one, and my reason for that was that was too early to even call it preliminary, which you take it however you want, wasn't the best reasoning, but today is my first preliminary winter forecast 2018-2019. However, before we dive into this video, I'd really highly recommend you guys to subscribe to my YouTube channel and like the video. Now, you may be wondering why to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't even watched a video. If you're new to my channel, why would you subscribe to a random channel that this is your first video you're watching on? Well, this is just a reminder. If you like my channel, you like the video that you're seeing, and you like you could check out some of my other videos on my channel. And if you like my channel, you could subscribe. If you like this video, you could like the video. It's much appreciated. It helps out my channel, and you do not know how much one subscribe does to my channel. It's just, I'm so grateful for you guys. You have been subscribing so much these past couple of days. I've been gaining so much subscribers. I'm really grateful for that, so thank you for that, guys. And let's get into the actual winter outlook now. So these are the four main factors we will be looking at. If you recall, my very early winter outlook, four factors were exactly the same. Except last, I think, winter outlook I called the analogs anomalies for some reason, so pardon me about that, but I now have corrected it to analogs. And the first factor we will be looking at is the ENSO, which is El Niño Southern Oscillation. I'll explain that in further detail later on. The second factor is a QBO, which is quasi-biennial oscillation. Again, I'll explain it later on. Sorry about that. And the third factor we'll be looking at is NOAA's seasonal outlook. I know NOAA maybe doesn't have the best handle on stuff, and obviously they're not 100% accurate just because they're a government-sponsored organization. And but it's still great to look at their forecast to see what we have in common, what my forecast has in common with theirs, and see if we can find some common ground. And the fourth factor we'll be looking at is the analogs, comparing previous winters to the upcoming one. And I think that is actually going to come third, not fourth. I'm not sure how I organize this exactly because I did this a couple days ago. But I know that the first one is the ENSO outlook. So ENSO neutral is favored through July through September 2018. We don't need to worry about that since July through September is not winter. But then El Nino is favored thereafter. Chances for El Nino are near 70% during Northern Hemisphere winter 2018-2019. NOAA is fairly confident that there will be an El Nino forming. However, I'm also fairly sure that there will be an El Nino forming, but it is a little bit iffy. At this point, there are some alarming signs that an El Nino may not be forming, but at this point it's still too much of a claim to say El Nino will not be forming. I still have, instead of 70, I would say I had around 50% chance, or 60, that's what I'm giving it, that an El Nino will form. And if it does form, you may be wondering, well, what on earth does that mean for my area where I live? Well, a typical pattern for El Nino during the winter looks something like this. Warm and dry across the north, and wet and cool across the south. So obviously, yes, if you're asking, does that mean that I'll get less snow if I live in the north? Yes, you typically will get less snow than average. Say if your average in Minnesota is around 60 inches, maybe 70, you'd maybe get around 40 or 50. And if you live somewhere in Georgia or Alabama, northern Mississippi, areas like that, North Carolina, and your average is around 6-8 inches, then you may this year receive up to 12, or even, if you have a good snowstorm, you may receive up to 14 and 16. So again, the north will still see more snow than the south. It's just compared to average, the south will be seeing more snow than the north. However, there's a catch to this. And we need to look at the water temperatures in order to completely understand the situation that will be occurring. So, during a regular El Nino, the sea surface temperatures, which is SST, are typically eastern-based in the Pacific Ocean. You can see this is the Pacific Ocean extending from Oceania all the way to South America. And if we look at this, it is more eastern-based than western-based, and not even central-based. So it is more eastern-based. However, during an El Niño Modoki, which may be happening, and I'll explain why I think it may be happening this year, the sea surface temperatures, the anomalies, you can see that it's cooler right off the coast, it's warmer in the center, and it's cooler back by Oceania. So Again, this may be forming, maybe not, but I do have some confidence that the El Niño Modoki may be forming, and in fact, NOAA's outlook actually kind of representing the situation if an El Niño Modoki would form. It's showing signs that an El Niño Modoki may be forming, and that is also, another thing that my forecast and NOAA's forecast find common ground in. So this is how a El Niño Modoki looks like. And this is how a El Niño looks like. An eastern-based El Niño. This is called a central-based El Niño because those warm waters are in the center. And now the next image I'll show you is the current sea surface temperatures. And I'd like to ask you guys a question. Which do you think looks more like? Again, looking at this area, it looks definitely more like an El Niño Modoki rather than an El Niño. I know this could still change. Winter's not even here. And even in the ENSO outlook, they said it might only develop after September. However, there are some alarming similarities that go along with the El Niño Modoki as compared to now. So let's look, just looking at the Pacific Basin, as of now, it looks way more closer to the El Niño Modoki. There's some cooler waters right off the coast. There is some warm water in the center and some cooler waters, but not necessarily showing signs of an El Niño Modoki in Oceania. So that may be like the only sign that isn't complying with the Oceania. However, now let's look at some other places, like say the El Niño Modoki, the PDO is negative. I think it's when it's in its warm phase, it's in its negative. Correct me if I'm wrong. But as you could see right here, it is above average as well in here currently, so that's already one similarity. If we look during a typical El Niño Modoki, the east coast, right off the east coast, it's above average. South of Greenland, is below average. If we look now, you could see same thing, below average and then above average by the east coast. If we look into even say south of or southwest of California, it's below average. It has been increasing in temperatures for the past several days now, but you can see that there are still some signs of below average temperatures. So you can see there are quite a bit of similarities that are occurring with a El Niño Modoki and the current sea surface temperatures. So that is definitely something we just can't ignore. And now, even if an El Niño Modoki formed, you may be wondering, what on earth does that mean for my location? Well, there's not really a map to show what an El Niño Modoki impacts, but we could create an analog year or an analog map, an anomaly map with all the previous years that were an El Niño Modoki. You could see these were known years to have an El Niño Modoki, November through March 2010, which is, according with this website, I needed to put in November through March with the 2010 being the March, not the November. So this was 2009, 2010. This was 1980, 1990, 1986 to 1987, 2002 to 2003. All these years were El Niño Modokis. If you don't believe me, you could search it up, El Niño Modoki years, and you'll find similar search results. So I took all the years, or at least most of the years together, and I compiled them into basically surface air temperatures anomalies. And you could see that a lot of the country, especially the eastern half of the southern country, if that makes any sense, basically is below average, while the northwestern part of the country is above average. That's why not much has changed with my outlook since my preliminary, or I think it was titled Very Early Winter Outlook. Not much has changed, because if we look with the typical El Niño Modoki, this is what we can expect. We can expect not great below average, not super below average temperatures, but they're definitely there, and that could mean the difference between an above average season in terms of snowfall and a below average season in terms of snowfall. One other thing I would like to point out is a lot of these below average temperatures occur in the second half of winter, or in the second two-thirds, or the later two-thirds of the winter. So I would say that most of these below average temperatures occur from around December to March rather than November, but I still included November because November is typically still always calculated into the season. And for many areas in the east and the north, November is a fairly substantial snow month, so I felt like that is still fairly important to calculate this in. Another map we got to look at that impacts with impacts an El Niño Modoki potentially has is this map, and this is a U.S. rainfall anomaly or precip amount for El Niño Modoki, which is a Central Pacific El Niño, which may be occurring this year. And you can see that again, the same areas which were colder may be receiving wetter than normal conditions. So again, what that would infer is more snow, and with more cold, that would produce more snow, more ice, and just more winter weather, which would make the winter more aggressive, and below in terms of weather index would be a higher, impact. So the Northwest may be drier than normal. That's why I have fairly high confidence that the Northwest this year will be below average, and it will take a great change in order to change that opinion. I'm fairly confident that this year the Northwest will not be into the winter weather in major ways. Obviously, the mountains will still receive snow, but it'll definitely be much below average. The next main factor I would like to look and discuss about is QBO, which is quasi-biennial oscillation. Now, the way this is measured is whether the winds in the stratosphere are blowing easterly or westerly, and the place this is measured is up in the equator, above the equator in the stratosphere. And if the winds are blowing easterly, which is also known as the eastward phase, we tend to get a negative reading in terms of the QBO index. And if we have a negative reading, you could see there's a lot more cold air and below average temperatures in the U.S. as to compare to the West. Now, when there's westerly phases, typically this pattern is flipped around with cooler temperatures in the West and warmer temperatures in the East. However, it doesn't have that big of an impact on the West as it does on the East. That is just something I would like to point out. So you may be wondering, well, how does a QBO prediction for this winter look like? Well, we don't have an exact forecast. There isn't something like the ENSO forecast where we could look at. There's just patterns that we gotta notice in previous years. So again, this kind of does apply to analogs, but I just put it in QBO by itself, a different category, because it's so different in a sense. So let's just look at different years that were El Niño Modokis, just for the sake of it. If an El Niño Modoki is gonna happen, and if we were going to, if we're sticking to it, you might as well stick to it to the end. So you could see 2009 was a Modoki year, and towards the end right here, these three last ones is I think that's October, November, and December. These last three. So 2009, let's see, it was in the negatives. If we look at another El Niño Modoki year, which was 2003, I'm fairly sure, you could see a negative reading. 2004, and 2005, I think, was also an El Niño Modoki year. Again, negative reading. 1995 was a Modoki year. Again, even it wasn't, majorly negative, but still slightly negative. If we look at 1987, 1986, these were Modoki years, you could see below average in terms of the QBO index, or negative readings. So 2018, if this does pan out to be a QBO, or sorry, this pans out to be an El Niño Modoki year, we may end up seeing a negative reading, which would in terms create a colder winter in the east and a warmer winter in the west. But again, this is just a factor that is so obscure and is just kind of an outlier in sense that it doesn't have much other things to support it on, because we need to do a lot of guessing. It's basically cherry picking, if you know what I mean. There's a lot of cherry picking going on. The El Niño Modoki needs to happen, and in order for an El Niño Modoki to happen, we need this and that and this. So this is again just a potential that could happen if everything goes together as forecasted, which I doubt it will. But the next thing I want to look at is NOAA's seasonal outlook. And NOAA's seasonal outlook is a fairly quick, simple representation of what the winter may look like, or what the months during winter may look like. So this is for November, December, January, the first half of winter. And you can see this is made July 19th, the last time it was updated. So they're going to update this soon, I think. I don't know how often they update this, but possibly once a month. And you can see that for November, December, January, a lot of the northern part of the country is above average. But where the El Niño Modoki may be forming, you could see equal chances, or the best chances for below average conditions are towards the south. Which, even if an El Niño formed, it would be similar, but with an El Niño Modoki, it will be more leaning towards the eastern coast. And again, in terms of precipitation, as we were looking with the El Niño Modoki and a typical El Niño Modoki precip anomalies, you could see it's going to be above average in terms of precip. I wouldn't put this way up here into the west because this just looks like a way too typical of an El Nino pattern, which all El Ninos are not the same. And I would just extend it further like this in terms of precip. I would put that up there, and I'll show you that, guys, my final forecast in a minute. Now let's move on to December, January, February 2018 into 2019, and you can see that the equal chances extend further into the south and possibly even up the east coast into the mid-Atlantic. I would extend this further into the east and further to the west, and I'd put this above average further into the northwest. Also with the you can see this is, you can see that I think, yeah, the 3-month temperature precipitation probability basically stays the same from November, December, January as from December, January to February. So NOAA, I don't think they have a good handle on this if they're basically showing the same exact things, because that is absolutely not going to happen. That's just not how weather works, where the exact same areas are going to see above average conditions in terms of precip. I would again extend this out further into the east, this above precip, and cut it down somewhere around here. Well, I guess it's high time to show you my winter forecast, guys. Drum roll, please. And this is how it looks like. Again, it's not the best. It's not the high quality in terms of the actual drawing of the map. But again, it's not the quality of the map. It's the quality of the forecast. So what I think is, this is what's going to happen. Colder and snowier and above average precip in this area that is highlighted in blue. And you can see there's different shades. I think the darker the blue, the more chances of seeing a colder and snowier winter you will have. And especially towards 2019, mainly applies towards this light blue area. I think winter may start off around average or even above average for some of these locations, highlighted in this light blue. But then towards winter turning later into the year in 2018 and essentially into 2019, I think winter may get colder. And for the northwest, I do think it'll be warmer, drier, plus less snow. Especially, I'm fairly confident in this area with this dark orange color, and with this lighter orange. I think that again, that could mean this could mean not as warm and dry as this area, but still I think it'll be drier than normal. And this area may be wondering, well, what if I live, say, in northwest Iowa or in Minnesota? What does this mean? What does this mean for me? Well, again, either way, this cold air could expand, and this above average conditions or below average temperatures and above average precip may extend all the way up here, or the warm and drier area may expand into here. That's all based on how things play out. So this is kind of like the battle zone between these two. Either one, if you say live in Minnesota, you may be either under warmer, drier, or colder and snowier. I think it will be towards the warmer and drier, but again, I don't think it will be considered a dry or not snowy winter. So that is basically it for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider subscribing to my channel. Please consider liking the video, and I'll see you guys all in the next episode.